CM Punk has suddenly vanished from WWE TV, and now reports are claiming major issues with the creative team may have pushed him to quit. Considering Punk's long history of explosive backstage fallout, fans think there may be no coming back after this. Let me break down what's happening. CM Punk made a brief appearance on the April 20 episode of Monday Night Raw, one day after losing the World Heavyweight Championship to Roman Reigns. In the main event of WrestleMania 42, on Raw, Punk had a short interaction with WWE Champion Cody Rhodes. Rhodes told Punk, "Just say when," hinting at a potential title bout down the road. And then nothing. CM Punk was reportedly pulled from advertising for WWE's upcoming European Summer Tour, leading fans to question whether the former World Heavyweight Champion could be stepping away from the company once again. This wasn't a small blip. The former World Heavyweight Champion had not appeared on Raw or SmackDown since dropping the title at WrestleMania 42, and WWE had neither explained his absence on air nor woven it into a storyline. That silence hit different when you factor in the scale of what Punk had just done. Punk had held the World Heavyweight Championship for 169 days before dropping the title to Reigns at WrestleMania. There were even talks, reported by Dave Meltzer, that Punk could beat Roman at Mania before eventually losing the title to him at Backlash 2026, which would have protected Punk's position, but the decision in the end was for Reigns to win at WrestleMania. So what happened next? WWE made a series of creative calls, big ones. Sources tell False Finish that CM Punk is currently awaiting creative to return to WWE TV. Punk's schedule and creative were shifted after WWE made the decision to move Gunther to SmackDown, along with bringing Jacob Fatu to Raw to feud with Roman Reigns. Think about that for a second. One roster reshuffling, two names moved around on a creative whiteboard, and suddenly CM Punk, a man who just main evented the biggest show of the year, has no place on the card. Gunther entered the picture and ignited a program with Rhodes that now anchors the championship scene. With that feud taking priority, Punk no longer had a natural spot at the top of the card. Rather than forcing him into a story that felt rushed, WWE may have chosen to wait. In recent days, promotions quietly removed Punk from promotional material, including some European tour dates and Raw advertising. Social media speculation intensified after reports suggested that WWE's parent company, TKO Group Holdings, had encouraged several top stars to accept pay cuts as part of broader financial restructuring efforts. That immediately fueled theories that Punk may not be aligned with management regarding his current contract situation, especially given the likelihood that he is among WWE's highest-paid stars. The internet predictably caught fire. People started asking the question that has followed this man for over a decade. Is CM Punk quitting again? The Second City Saint had been on hiatus and was pulled from upcoming events in June as well. Punk's next appearance was scheduled to be on July 6 Raw from his hometown of Chicago. Backstage insiders said WWE officials still viewed Punk as a major star and expected him back in action in time for the company's summer peak. The plan, according to those with knowledge of internal discussions, was to bring him back around the SummerSlam season with a high-impact role that justifies the long absence. But here's the thing. When CM Punk disappears, history gives you every reason to pay attention, because this man has walked away before. He has burned every bridge, crossed every Rubicon, and done it so many times that the pattern itself becomes the story. To understand what is happening right now, you have to go back, way back. The year was 2014, and the Royal Rumble was the last match CM Punk ever wrestled. In his first run with WWE, with his last WWE appearance coming at the Royal Rumble in January 2014, CM Punk's sudden disappearance from the company triggered intense speculation among wrestling fans and industry insiders. Fans had to wait almost a year, until November 2014, to hear Punk explain his reasons for asking to leave WWE. On the now infamous Art of Wrestling podcast with Colt Cabana. What came out of that podcast was one of the most unfiltered, devastating takedowns of a professional wrestling organization ever put on tape. Punk highlighted numerous issues with WWE, including alleged medical negligence, creative differences, and a perceived lack of respect. In addition to health issues, Punk expressed deep frustration over creative decisions made by WWE management. He felt sidelined despite having held the championship for an impressive 434 days. Instead of headlining WrestleMania 29, as many believed he deserved, other stars like John Cena took precedence in storylines. This lack of recognition stung deeply for someone who had poured so much into their craft. It was a championship reign for the ages, one of the longest in modern WWE history. And what did it get him? Punk and The Undertaker stole the show. But their collision was not the main event at WrestleMania 29. Instead, Punk and the Deadman flourished before Cena and The Rock went on. Other sources of unhappiness Punk had with WWE included his failure to main event a WrestleMania, something he deemed his entire career to be a failure as a result, being paid less than the other wrestlers in the three most significant matches of WrestleMania 29, doing favors for Vince McMahon, and not being owed back, being creatively stifled, feeling that there were no long-term plans for wrestlers other than John Cena, as well as receiving less pay and not getting answers as to how the advent of the WWE network would affect wrestlers' salaries. That word, creatively stifled, is the thread. Pull it, and everything unravels. Punk walked into a closed-door meeting and told Vince McMahon and Triple H exactly what he thought. In that meeting, he told Triple H and McMahon, "You have shackled me. You have creatively stifled me. You have made this a very toxic environment. I no longer want to be here." He quit. WWE made no announcement. The silence from the company was deafening, and then it got worse. On his wedding day, Punk received a FedEx in his mail informing him about his firing. But he didn't let any of it affect his special day. "The day of my wedding, I got a FedEx in the mail. It was my termination papers. I was fired on my wedding day." Very calculated, very deliberate. Vince McMahon, on Stone Cold Steve Austin's podcast, accepted that CM Punk was fired on his wedding day. McMahon also apologized during the podcast and said that Punk getting his termination papers on the day of his wedding was an unfortunate coincidence. Punk wasn't buying it, and frankly, neither was anyone who had been watching. The frustration had been building for years. That moment was no sudden emotional outburst. The wick was alight back in 2011, the beginning of a slow burn to that eventual explosion. Punk described having left with zero passion for wrestling, and described himself at the time of the interview to be the happiest he had ever been in many years. He was done, or so everyone thought. Following his departure from WWE, CM Punk took 7 years off from in-ring competition. The former WWE champion even jumped ship to compete in the UFC, but lost both of his fights in the promotion. Punk's second professional bout took place at UFC 225 on June 9, 2018. Against Mike Jackson in his hometown of Chicago. Punk lost the one-sided fight via unanimous decision. After the bout, UFC president Dana White said that both Punk and Jackson would probably not fight for the UFC again, and urged Punk to call it a wrap. So with the UFC door firmly closed, Punk eventually found a new wrestling home. Following a less than successful run in the UFC, CM Punk made a much-anticipated return to professional wrestling, joining AEW in August 2021. His comeback to wrestling was met with a wave of excitement across social media and wrestling forums, highlighting his insane popularity, even after 7 years out of the business. Punk's emotional AEW debut at the Rampage event had fans crying and truly getting invested in a wrestling hero again. It should have been the perfect second act. A beloved rebel returning to wrestling on his own terms. At a company that gave him the creative freedom, WWE had denied him. But the very quality that made Punk compelling, his refusal to accept anything less than what he felt was right, turned AEW into a battlefield. A fallout with the Elite led to plenty of drama and kept Punk off TV for nearly a year. Those NDAs were focused on Brawl Out, the backstage fight with the Elite after Punk's incendiary remarks at the post-all-out media scrum on Labor Day weekend in 2022. Things never fully recovered from that. The discussion of the All-In incident began with AEW not providing transportation for Punk. When he arrived in London for the show at Wembley Stadium, he said it wasn't a big deal, but was completely irresponsible as a company to leave someone stranded at the airport. And then came the moment that ended everything. At AEW All-In, a backstage fight occurred between CM Punk and Jack Perry. Following Perry's 0-hour match, where the former Jungle Boy had yelled, "Real glass. Go cry me a river" at the camera. A comment directed at Punk, who had told Perry not to use real glass. It resulted in a backstage fight that ended with Tony Khan firing Punk, saying he had feared for his life. Punk later stated, in an April 2024 interview on the MMA Hour with Ariel Helwani, that he initially wanted to leave AEW entirely, rather than have Collision be a show revolving around him, and not the Elite. And that after the altercation with Perry, he told Khan to his face, "You're a fucking clown, I quit." Punk also further criticized AEW, stating that it is not a real business and not about making money. Punk also went on to claim that no one from AEW had spoken to him in 6 months after the altercation at All Out, in September 2022, and that he was forced to pay for his own surgery and do recovery on his own. 2 companies, 2 war zones, creative disrespect, management conflicts, backstage brawls. You could be forgiven for thinking this man was simply impossible to work with. But the people who knew him most closely insisted something else was happening. A man with extraordinarily high standards who refused to become a cog in someone else's machine, crashing repeatedly against institutional indifference. And every single time he walked away from the wreckage, he found a way back. CM Punk made his shocking return to WWE at Survivor Series in November 2023. CM Punk made his WWE return at the Survivor Series in November 2023. Head of creative, Paul Triple H Levesque, and the Cult of Personality sat down for a 1-hour meeting the week before to finally clear the air and move past their old issues so he could make his grand comeback. It was said that no one outside Triple H, CM Punk, and the wrestlers in the match knew he was showing up at the end of the show. Triple H even threw up the final copyright logo on screen before his music started to throw off fans. What resulted was an incredible pop and a negative response from Seth Rollins. Rollins' reaction told its own story. Former World Heavyweight Champion Seth Rollins had been able to turn his real-life hatred of Punk into a storyline angle that culminated on the WWE Raw Netflix debut. But the Visionary's visceral reaction when Punk made his surprise return to WWE following the War Games match didn't go unnoticed by millions of fans watching. Rollins has repeatedly called Punk a cancer to the business, both well before and after his return to the company. The dynamic was electric, divisive, and exactly the kind of creative fuel that the new WWE under Triple H was built for. Because here's what changed. For the first time in his career, Punk found himself genuinely at peace inside WWE's walls. Since CM Punk's return to WWE, he had been singing a completely different tune, whereas CM Punk hated the WWE of old under Vince McMahon. He praised this new era under Triple H. He even stated that if WWE creative were the way it is today, back then, he never would have left the company. The results backed that feeling up. Fightful stated, "Thus far, we've heard that CM Punk has overcome the reputation he had coming back to WWE, and has been very easy to deal with. This was a version of Punk the wrestling world had never really seen. A man who was satisfied, engaged, and firing on all cylinders." On the debut episode of Raw on Netflix, on January 6, 2025, Punk wrestled his first match on Raw in almost 11 years, where he defeated Seth Rollins. At the Royal Rumble on February 1, Punk entered the titular match at 24 and made it to the Final Four before being eliminated by Logan Paul and getting into an altercation with Rollins and Roman Reigns, both of whom he had eliminated. CM Punk had been on one of the best runs of his entire career. He was a bona fide main event star involved in some of the best storylines in the company. He went to war with Drew McIntyre. He had physical and verbal fights with Seth Rollins. He also feuded with Roman Reigns and main evented Night 1 of WrestleMania 41, and then he became champion. Punk held the World Heavyweight Championship for 169 days, before dropping the title to Reigns at WrestleMania. Dave Meltzer awarded the WrestleMania 42 Night 2 main event match between Roman Reigns and CM Punk a 5-star rating. This was the culmination. This was the version of CM Punk's story that fans had waited a decade for, and the next chapter was supposed to be even bigger. Cody Rhodes had already whispered the invitation, "Just say when," implying a future WWE Championship match that could headline SummerSlam or beyond. But that's when the creative ground shifted beneath his feet. Again. Part 5. The verdict. What is actually happening? So let's be direct about what the evidence says. CM Punk did not quit WWE. There is currently no official confirmation that CM Punk has left WWE. The exact reason is unknown, though speculation includes possible time off, injury recovery, or contract-related discussions. What actually happened is more mundane, and in some ways more telling than a walkout. False Finish reported that WWE adjusted CM Punk's post-WrestleMania schedule and creative plans, which is why he's been off television for 5 weeks. Punk's schedule and creative were shifted after WWE made the decision to move Gunther to SmackDown, along with bringing Jacob Fatu to Raw to feud with Roman Reigns. 2 roster moves, that's it. That's what displaced the most talked-about performer in the company. The rise of the Gunther and Cody Rhodes rivalry changed the creative map. Gunther's attack repositioned him as the primary threat in the championship conversation. That development closed the lane that many expected Punk to occupy. WWE's hesitation to put Punk back on weekly TV without a clear direction has reportedly been intentional. Creative teams are said to be evaluating where he fits best, not simply plugging him into the next scheduled show. There's a belief that a well-timed return would land with bigger impact than a rushed comeback. Although CM Punk has been off WWE programming in recent weeks, he is reportedly expected to be back in the fold for an upcoming major premium live event. According to WrestleVotes on Fightful Select, Punk will be a significant part of SummerSlam, which is scheduled for August 1 and 2 in Minneapolis. WrestleVotes added that Punk could potentially even be involved with the July 18 Saturday night's main event at Madison Square Garden in New York City, and Punk himself had telegraphed exactly this kind of longevity. Earlier this year, Punk openly reflected on how much longer he expects to wrestle. When I was 15, if you asked me if I'd be wrestling when I was 40, I would tell you no, that's crazy. 40 is so old, Punk said. Punk went on to explain that he likely sees age 50 as the point where he should gracefully bow out. I'm still having fun operating at a high level, no matter what anybody says. And until I can't contribute, I still will, Punk added. So here's the full picture. CM Punk did not quit. He did not storm out over a creative dispute. He did not text his resignation the way the internet wanted to believe. And he certainly did not send a FedEx to Triple H's office. But the reason this story has legs, the reason it spread like wildfire the moment he disappeared, is because of everything that came before. This is a man who walked out of WWE in 2014 over creative disrespect, who received his termination papers on his wedding day, who feuded and brawled his way out of AEW in spectacular fashion, who came back to WWE and rebuilt his entire reputation brick by brick, only to be shuffled off television with no explanation the moment one roster domino fell the wrong way. That decision left Punk temporarily without a defined path. It is not a demotion. It is a shift in timing. But here's what that framing misses. For CM Punk specifically, the absence of a defined path is not just an inconvenience, it is a recurring wound. It is the same thing that chased him out the door a decade ago. Being held at such incredible heights, championship reigns, WrestleMania main events, 5-star matches, and then being placed in a holding pattern with no explanation, no public acknowledgement, no storyline reason for the silence. That is the pattern. Industry watchers note that WWE often uses lengthy pauses to build anticipation for marquee returns. Punk's long layoff, framed correctly, could amplify excitement and give fresh momentum to his next storyline. WWE's logic is sound. The business logic is unimpeachable. But the conversation it has reignited is a reflection of something deeper. A fan base that has watched CM Punk, more than almost any other performer in wrestling history, collide with institutional systems that fail to value him properly until he is already out the door. It is safe to say that the relationship between CM Punk and WWE now is far better than where it was 5 and 10 years ago. That is undeniable. Triple H's creative regime is not Vince McMahon's machine. Punk himself said so, but the mechanics of a wrestling calendar, the cold math of who feuds with whom, which title program gets the spotlight, which superstar gets parked while the board resets, that machinery doesn't care about history, it just moves. CM Punk did not quit, but the creative team did without question. Leave him standing on the side of the road while the car drove off. Whether he accepts the ride when it comes back around, whether SummerSlam 2026 becomes the moment the whole thing reignites, that for now is the only question left worth asking. CM Punk remains tentatively advertised for multiple future episodes of WWE Raw, including the July 6th show at the Allstate Arena in Chicago, his hometown. He is also still listed for Raw events in Dallas, Detroit, Los Angeles, and Des Moines later this summer. The car is coming back. Whether Punk is in it, watch this space.